The kings, Medes, and Persians. Dan chapter 11 verses 1-2 King James Version. Also I in the first year of Darius the Mede, even I, stood to confirm and to strengthen him. 2 And now will I show thee the truth. Behold, there shall stand up yet 3 kings in Persia, and the 4th shall be far richer than they all, and by his strength through his riches he shall stir up all against the realm of Grecia. The angel informs Daniel that he had stood with Darius and gave him strength. There were those who would have treated the Jews badly, but God caused Darius to allow the Jews to return home. The angel will inform Daniel what his people will face from that time until the time of the Antichrist. Cambyses II 530-522. Smerdis, an usurper killed by Darius I, 522-521. Darius I, known as Darius I the Hystaspes, 521-486. Then we are told that a 4th king would rule who was far richer than all the others. This king is Xerxes, also known as Ahasuerus, the same Ahasuerus that chooses Esther as wife. This king would stir up everyone against the kingdom of Greece. In 480 BC the Persians under King Xerxes again attacked Greece. The invasion of Greece that ended in defeat at the Battle of Salamis in 480. The Greek Empire. Daniel chapter 11 verses 3-4 King James Version. And a mighty king shall stand up, that shall rule with great dominion, and do according to his will. 4 And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken, and shall be divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, and not to his posterity, nor according to his dominion which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up, even for others beside those. A mighty king is Alexander the Great, coming to power in 325 BC, becomes master of the Greco-Macedonian Empire. He conquered the Persians. He is the notable horn of Daniel 8. 4 And when he shall stand up, his kingdom shall be broken. Alexander would die 323 BC. At 33 years of age. His kingdom would not pass to his sons. 4 of Alexander's generals would divide his kingdom among themselves. Seleucus Nicator would rule over the Syrian section, Cassander would rule Greece and Macedon, Lysimachus Thrace and Asia Minor in the north, and Ptolemy Lago took Egypt in the south. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verses 5 King James Version. And the king of the south shall be strong, and one of his princes, and he shall be strong above him, and have dominion, his dominion shall be a great dominion. After Alexander's death, the Greek Empire was divided by his 4 generals. 2 of them and their descendants predominate this part of chapter 11. The kings of the south, Egypt, and the kings of the north, Syria. This remarkable prophecy spells out in detail the 150-year struggle between the Ptolemies of Egypt and the Seleucids of Syria to control the Middle East. The king of the south is Ptolemy Isoter, whose ambitions extended far beyond Egypt to include Palestine and the rest of Asia. For most of their history, however, the domain of the Ptolemies was restricted to Egypt and Cyprus. The prince who would be stronger than the king was Seleucus I Nicator of the Seleucid Empire, who defected to Ptolemy after the Battle of Antigonus. He later returned to Babylon and became king under Ptolemy's sponsorship. His empire and authority stretched from India to Phoenicia, and thus was much greater than that of Ptolemy. The kings of the north and south. Daniel 11:6 King James Version. And in the end of years they shall join themselves together, for the king's daughter of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement, but she shall not retain the power of the arm, neither shall he stand, nor his arm, but she shall be given up, and they that brought her, and he that begot her, and he that strengthened her in these times. After the death of Ptolemy I in 285, his son Ptolemy II, Philadelphus, continued the contest with the Seleucids until 252, when a peace treaty was made with Antiochus II Thus. Under this treaty, Antiochus II was to marry Berenice, the daughter of Ptolemy II. Antiochus II Theos was already married to his sister named Laodice. she was to be divorced and banished as a condition of the treaty. Ptolemy Philadelphus dies, Antiochus Theos recalled his former wife Laodice and her children, and she, fearing that he might again recall Berenice, caused him to be poisoned. She had Berenice's Egyptian attendants and supporters murdered. The Church of Laodicea gets its name from this evil woman Laodice. It is the man, whose name means Antichrist, who builds and names the city. Antiochus, against, Theos, God, Antichrist. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verses 7 to 8 King James Version, but out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against them, and shall prevail. 8 And shall also carry captives into Egypt their gods, with their princes, and with their precious vessels of silver and of gold, and he shall continue more years than the king of the north. Ptolemy too died soon after his daughter Berenice was murdered. His son, Ptolemy III, Euergetes, came to power and marched off to avenge his sister's death. He is the branch from her Berenice's roots in verse 7. The king of the north is Seleucus II Callinicus, the son of Laodice. Ptolemy captured the capital city of Antioch and returned to Egypt laden with spoil. This spoil included long-lost idols that had been taken by Cambyses in 524 BC. Their return made Ptolemy III very popular with the native Egyptian populace, who named him Euergetes, which means benefactor. Ptolemy III made a peace treaty with Seleucus II in 240 BC. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verse 9 King James Version, so the king of the south shall come into his kingdom and shall return into his own land. So the king of the south, Ptolemy Euergetes, shall come into his kingdom. That of Seleucus Callinicus. And shall return, having heard that a sedition had taken place in Egypt. Ptolemy Euergetes was obliged to return speedily in order to repress it, else he had wholly destroyed the kingdom of Seleucus Callinicus. Daniel chapter 11 verse 10 King James Version, but his sons shall be stirred up, and shall assemble a multitude of great forces, and one shall certainly come, and overflow, and pass through, then shall he return, and be stirred up, even to his fortress. But his sons shall be stirred up, that is, the sons of Callinicus, who were Seleucus, Cyrannus and Antiochus, afterwards called the Great. Shall assemble a multitude. Seleucus Cyrannus did assemble a multitude of forces in order to recover his father's dominions, but, not having money to pay them, they became mutinous, and he was poisoned by 2 of his own generals. His brother Antiochus was then proclaimed king, so that one only of the sons did certainly come, and overflow, and pass through. He retook Seleucia, and regained Syria. He then returned, and overcame Nicolaus the Egyptian general, and seemed disposed to invade Egypt, as he came even to his fortress, to the frontiers of Egypt. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verses 11 to 12 King James Version, and the king of the south shall be moved with choler, and shall come forth and fight with him, even with the king of the north, and he shall set forth a great multitude, but the multitude shall be given into his hand. 12 And when he hath taken away the multitude, his heart shall be lifted up, and he shall cast down many 10,000, but he shall not be strengthened by it. Ptolemy IV Philopator, the new Ptolemy ruler in the south, aroused by the prospects of an invasion of Egypt by Antiochus III Magnus, Antiochus III the Great, went forth to fight with him. Antiochus III, the king of the north, had come with a very large army, amounting to 62,000 foot, 6,000 horse, and 102 elephants, which Ptolemy IV defeated, casting down 10,000 soldiers. Antiochus was obliged to retreat with his scattered army to Antioch. Yet nothing was gained by the battle. Ptolemy IV Philopator did not pursue the defeated king of the north. His heart shall be lifted up. Had Ptolemy Philopator improved his victory, he might have dispossessed Antiochus of his whole empire, but giving way to pride, and criminally sensual life, He entered Jerusalem and attempted to force the Jews to allow him to offer sacrifices in their temple. The restraint offered by the priests so angered him that when he returned to Egypt, he killed several thousand Jews who then lived in Egypt. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verse 13 King James Version, For the king of the north shall return, and shall set forth a multitude greater than the former, and shall certainly come after certain years with a great army and with much riches. For a period of 14 years, there was peace between the Ptolemy and the Seleucids. When Ptolemy IV Philopator died, his son, Ptolemy V Epiphanes, who was still a minor, took the throne. In the north, Antiochus III Magnus took advantage of this seeming weakness in Egypt and made extensive preparations to invade Egypt with the design of taking over the Ptolemy kingdom. He made an alliance with Philip of Macedon, a successor to Cassander in the west, to make a joint attack on Egypt, whose possessions they would then divide. In 202, Antiochus III, the king of the north, invaded Phoenicia and Palestine and marched all the way to Gaza, which fell in 201. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verses 14 to 15 King James Version, And in those times there shall many stand up against the king of the south, also the robbers of thy people shall exalt themselves to establish the vision, but they shall fall. 15 So the king of the north shall come, and cast up a mount, and take the most fenced cities, and the arms of the south shall not withstand, neither his chosen people, neither shall there be any strength to withstand. The many people refer to an alliance Antiochus III, the king of the north, makes with Philip of Macedon, a successor to Cassander in the west, to make a joint attack on Egypt, whose possessions they would then divide. The robbers of thy people, refers to some Jews who will join with Antiochus thinking that this would set them free from the southern domination. All they were doing was giving Syria a grip on Israel, something they would regret. We are told that they establish the vision. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verses 16 to 17 King James Version, But he that cometh against him shall do according to his own will, and none shall stand before him, and he shall stand in the glorious land, which by his hand shall be consumed. 17 He shall also set his face to enter with the strength of his whole kingdom, and upright ones with him, thus shall he do, and he shall give him the daughter of women, corrupting her, but she shall not stand on his side, neither be for him. Now Antiochus the Great controls the glorious land. The mercenaries were well looked after, but they were disappointed that their land was not set free. Antiochus the Great, aware of the Roman threat that was rising, thought it good to settle things between himself and Egypt. Antiochus III's plan at this point in the story was to place the 10-year-old King Ptolemy V under the influence of his daughter Cleopatra I, called here the daughter of women, because of her great beauty and accomplishments. He knew that their son would be legal heir to both thrones and would give him a good excuse to interfere in Egypt. The phrase destroy the kingdom in verse 17 is better translated corrupt the kingdom. His daughter Cleopatra, he intended his daughter to be a snare to Ptolemy, and therefore purposed to corrupt her that she might betray her husband. But she shall not stand on his side. On the contrary, her husband's interests became more dear to her than her father's, and by her means Ptolemy was put upon his guard against the intentions of Antiochus. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verses 18 to 19 King James Version, After this shall he turn his face unto the isles, and shall take many, but a prince for his own behalf shall cause the reproach offered by him to cease, without his own reproach he shall cause it to turn upon him. 19 Then he shall turn his face toward the fort of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and not be found. Soon after his victory over General Scopas at Sidon, Antiochus III moved against a new front, Pergamum and the Aegean coastline island of Rhodes. Antiochus had fitted out a great fleet of 100 large ships and 200 smaller, and with this fleet subdued most of the maritime places on the coast of the Mediterranean, and took many of the isles, Rhodes, Samos, Euboea, Colophon, and others. The Rhodians appealed to Rome for help. Meanwhile, Hannibal, who had been exiled by the Romans, joined forces with Antiochus III as a military advisor. The Romans were not happy that he had given asylum to their enemy. The Roman commander Lucius Cornelius Scipio defeated Antiochus III in 190 at Magnesium. This same general had defeated Hannibal in 202. Antiochus was humiliated by the Romans. He lost most of his land and his army. His son Antiochus IV Epiphanes was taken back to Rome as a hostage. But a prince for his own behalf, or a captain. The consul Asilius Glabrio caused the reproach to cease, beat and routed his army at the Straits of Thermopylae and expelled him from Greece. So he obliged him to pay the tribute which he hoped to impose on others, for he would grant him peace only on condition of paying the expense of the war, 15,000 talents, 500 on the spot, 2,500 when the peace should be ratified by the Senate, and the remaining 12,000 in 12 years, each year 1,000. The Kings of the North and South. Daniel chapter 11 verse 20 King James Version, Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes in the glory of the kingdom, but within few days he shall be destroyed, neither in anger, nor in battle. Then shall stand up in his estate a raiser of taxes. Seleucus IV Philopator succeeded his father Antiochus. Due to the defeat by the Romans levied the Syrians 1,000 talents annually. He sent his treasurer Heliodorus to seize the money deposited in the Temple of Jerusalem, which is here called the glory of the kingdom, see 2 Maccabees chapter 9 verse 23. He was so cramped to pay the annual tax to the Romans, that he was obliged to burden his subjects with continual taxes. He shall be destroyed, neither in anger fighting against an enemy, nor in battle at the head of his troops, but basely and treacherously, by the hand of Heliodorus his treasurer, who hoped to reign in his stead. Daniel chapter 11 verse 21 King James Version, And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Verses 21 through 35 are devoted to the activities of Antiochus IV Epiphanes. He is the contemptible person in verse 21 to whom royal majesty has not been given. In fact, Demetrius Isoter, the son of Seleucus IV, was next in line for the crown. He, however, was being held hostage in Rome, so the crown went to his uncle, Antiochus IV Epiphanes instead. Antiochus was later able to set aside Demetrius' claims to the throne, but Demetrius later led a Roman army against Antiochus' son, Antiochus V Eupator. The Kings of the North and South. Daniel chapter 11 verse 21 King James Version, And in his estate shall stand up a vile person, to whom they shall not give the honor of the kingdom, but he shall come in peaceably, and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. In his estate shall stand up a vile person. This was Antiochus, surnamed Epiphanes the Illustrious. They did not give him the honor of the kingdom. He was at Athens, on his way from Rome, when his father died. Antiochus came in peaceably, for he obtained the kingdom by flatteries. He flattered Eumenes, king of Pergamus, and Attalus his brother, and got their assistance. He flattered the Romans, and sent ambassadors to court their favor, and pay them the arrears of the tribute. He flattered the Syrians and gained their concurrence, and as he flattered the Syrians, so they flattered him, giving him the epithet of Epiphanes the Illustrious. But that he was what the prophet here calls him, a vile person, is fully evident from what Polybius says of him, from Athenians, Lib v. He was every man's companion, he resorted to the common shops, and prattled with the workmen, he frequented the common taverns, and ate and drank with the meanest fellows, singing debauched songs. On this account a contemporary writer, and others after him, instead of Epiphanes, called him Epimenes the madman. The Kings of the North and South. Daniel chapter 11 verses 21 to 24 King James Version, And with the arms of a flood shall they be overflown from before him, and shall be broken, yea, also the prince of the covenant. 23 And after the league made with him, he shall work deceitfully, for he shall come up and shall become strong with a small people. 24 He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers, he shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. And with the arms of a flood the arms which were overflown before him were his competitors for the crown. They were vanquished by the forces of Eumenes and Attalus, and were dissipated by the arrival of Antiochus from Athens, whose presence disconcerted all their measures. The prince of the covenant in verse 22 is probably Onias III, the high priest. Antiochus had him replaced by his brother, Joshua, who went by his Greek name Jason, in exchange for a large bribe. Jason was later replaced by Menelaus, who offered a larger bribe. Menelaus had Onias III, the legitimate high priest, killed. The small people in verse 23 refer to the small invasion force Antiochus used in his initial invasion of Egypt. The richest parts of the province refers not only to Egypt but also to the eastern provinces he invaded. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places, the very richest provinces, Coel, Syria and Palestine. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verse 24 King James Version. He shall enter peaceably even upon the fattest places of the province, and he shall do that which his fathers have not done, nor his fathers' fathers, he shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and riches, yea, and he shall forecast his devices against the strongholds, even for a time. Antiochus will gain influence in the choicest places by trickery more than by force. He shall scatter among them the prey, and spoil, and riches, which he took from the places or rich cities he entered into, and these he plentifully and liberally dispersed among his followers, his soldiers, the small people he became strong with, Daniel _11:23, whereby he gained their affections, and attached them to his interest, and in this his liberality and munificence he is said to abound above all the kings that were before him. He shall forecast his devices against the fortresses of Egypt, as he got into the fat and richest parts of it, and distributed the wealth of them among his favorites and followers, which answered a good purpose, so he had his eye upon the fortified places of the kingdom, and contrived ways and means to get them into his possession and how to keep them when he had got them, which he did. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verses 25 to 26 King James Version. And he shall stir up his power and his courage against the king of the south with a great army, and the king of the south shall be stirred up to battle with a very great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for they shall forecast devices against him. 26 Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat shall destroy him, and his army shall overflow, and many shall fall down slain. He shall stir up his power. Antiochus marched against Ptolemy, the king of the south, Egypt, with a great army, and the Egyptian generals had raised a mighty force. Antiochus IV invaded the Nile Delta, capturing Ptolemy VI Philometor, 180 to 145 BCE. Ptolemy VII Euergetes II Physcon took power in Alexandria and had some success, till Antiochus IV took the side of Ptolemy VI, gaining good advantage. Stirred up to battle, Ptolemy VI Philometor, knowing that Antiochus was coming with a large force, raised a very large army to face Antiochus with. The two armies met between Pelusium and Mount Cassius, but he, the king of the south, could not stand. The Egyptian army was defeated, with the capture of Ptolemy IV. Yea, they that feed of the portion of his meat. This is the proof of what has been last noted, that the intrigues of Antiochus, corrupting the ministers and officers of Ptolemy, were the cause of all the disasters that fell on the Egyptian king. They that fed of the portion of his meat, who were in his confidence and pay, and possessed the secrets of the state, betrayed him, and these were the means of destroying him and his army, so that he was defeated, as was before observed. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verse 27 King James Version. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, and they shall speak lies at one table, but it shall not prosper, for yet the end shall be at the time appointed. And both these kings' hearts shall be to do mischief, that is, Antiochus, and Ptolemy Philometor, who was nephew to the former, and whose interest he now pretended to have much at heart, since the Alexandrians had renounced their allegiance to him, and set his younger brother Euergetes, Physcon, upon the throne. When Antiochus came to Memphis, he and Philometor had frequent conferences at the same table, and at these times they spoke lies to each other, Antiochus professing great friendship to his nephew and concern for his interests, yet in his heart designing to ruin the kingdom by fomenting the discords which already subsisted between the two brothers. On the other hand, Philometor professed much gratitude to his uncle for the interest he took in his affairs, and laid the blame of the war upon his minister Iulius, while at the same time he spoke lies, determining as soon as possible to accommodate matters with his brother, and join all their strength against their deceitful uncle. But it shall not prosper, neither succeeded in his object, for the end of the appointed time was not yet come. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verse 28 King James Version, Then shall he return into his land with great riches, and his heart shall be against the holy covenant, and he shall do exploits, and return to his own land. Then shall he return unto his land with great riches. Antiochus did return, laden with riches, from the spoils that he took in Egypt. His heart shall be against the holy covenant. And hearing that there had been a report of his death, at which the citizens of Jerusalem had made great rejoicings, he was determined to take a severe revenge, and he had an ostensible pretext for it, for Jason, who had been deprived of the high priesthood, hearing the report of the death of Antiochus, raised forces, marched against Jerusalem, took it, and obliged Menelaus, the high priest, to shut himself up in the castle. Antiochus brought a great army against Jerusalem, took it by storm, slew 40,000 of the inhabitants, sold as many more for slaves, boiled swine's flesh, and sprinkled the temple and the altar with the broth, broke into the Holy of Holies, took away the golden vessels and other sacred treasures, to the value of 1,800 talents, restored Menelaus to his office, and made one Philip, a Phrygian, governor of Judea. These are what we term exploits, which having finished, he returned to his own land. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verses 29 to 30 King James Version, At the time appointed he shall return, and come toward the south, but it shall not be as the former, or as the latter. 34 The ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do, he shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. At the time appointed he shall return, finding that his treachery was detected, and that the two brothers had united their counsel and strength for their mutual support, he leaves only to come back with determined to take all of Egypt. Egyptians in Alexandria sent emissaries to Rome to request assistance. He was not to have the same results as the last time. For the ships of Chittim shall come against him. Chittim is well known to mean the Roman Empire. Antiochus, being now in full march to besiege Alexandria, and within 7 miles of that city, heard that ships had arrived there from Rome, with legates from the Senate. He went to salute them. They delivered to him the letters of the Senate, in which he was commanded, on pain of the displeasure of the Roman people, to put an end to the war against his nephews. Antiochus said he would go and consult his friends, on which Populus, one of the legates, took his staff, and instantly drew a circle round Antiochus on the sand where he stood, and commanded him not to pass that circle till he had given a definitive answer. Antiochus, intimidated, said, he would do whatever the Senate enjoined, and in a few days after began his march, and returned to Syria. The kings of the north and south. Daniel chapter 11 verses 30 to 31 King James Version, For the ships of Chittim shall come against him, therefore he shall be grieved, and return, and have indignation against the holy covenant, so shall he do, he shall even return, and have intelligence with them that forsake the holy covenant. 31 And arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. Antiochus was intimidated by the Romans, said, he would do whatever the Senate enjoined, and in a few days after began his march, and returned to Syria. Therefore he shall be grieved, grieving, and groaning, says Polybius, both mortified, humbled, and disappointed. Have indignation against the holy covenant, for he vented his rage against the Jews, and he sent his general, Apollonius, with 22,000 men against Jerusalem, plundered and set fire to the city, pulled down the houses round about it, slew much of the people, and built a castle on an eminence that commanded the temple, and slew multitudes of the poor people who had come up to worship, polluted every place, so that the temple service was totally abandoned, and all the people fled from the city. And when he returned to Antioch, he published a decree that all should conform to the Grecian worship, and the Jewish worship was totally abrogated, and the temple itself consecrated to Jupiter Olympius. The king of the north and Maccabeans. Daniel chapter 11 verses 31 to 32 King James Version, and arms shall stand on his part, and they shall pollute the sanctuary of strength, and shall take away the daily sacrifice, and they shall place the abomination that maketh desolate. 32 And such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. Antiochus Epiphanes stops the sacrifice and offers a hog on the altar of God. He commanded that the people be one people, with one religion and one set of laws, and, in order to enforce this upon the Jews, their sanctuary was profaned, the offerings and sacrifices prohibited, and an idol altar was built over the altar of God, upon which the swine was sacrificed. These actions caused the Maccabean revolt. In the meantime, he had gone with an army to Persia. Upon hearing the news of the revolt in Israel, broken-hearted he died of natural causes at to be 164 BC. The behavior of the Jews under the oppression of Antiochus Epiphanes is shown in verse 32. Some of them did wickedly, and forsook the covenant, and the religion of their fathers, and worshipped idols, and were led into this by flatteries. But there were some who knew their God, that he was able to deliver, and so they were made strong and did exploits. This refers to Mattathias, an aged priest, and his sons, known as the Maccabees, who from 166 BC to 47 BC fought to restore the national life of Israel. The Romans and the Maccabeans. Daniel chapter 11 verse 32 King James Version, and such as do wickedly against the covenant shall he corrupt by flatteries, but the people that do know their God shall be strong and do exploits. In 167 BC a priest named Matthias and his sons, John, Simon, Judas, Eleazar, and Jonathan, revolted against forced imposition of the Greek and religion on the Jews, and became known as the Maccabeans, which means hammer in the Jewish language. They Maccabeans formed the Hasmonean dynasty and became kings and priests despite the fact that they were not of the proper line to hold these offices. As a result of the success of this revolt, the Jews were able to live under their laws as their civil laws. This lasted until 66 AD when the Romans invaded Palestine and expelled the Jews from that area. The group who participated in the revolt became the Pharisees afterwards. In 63 BC, Pompey invaded Judea to settle a dispute between Hyrcanus and Aristobulus, were rival heirs to the throne of Judea. 12,000 Jews were killed in the process, the Holy of Holies was desecrated, and the Jews had to pay taxes to the Romans. The Romans continued to rule Israel. In 70 AD Titus, son of Roman Emperor Vespasian, plundered and destroyed first the Holy Temple of Jerusalem, and then the Holy City, slaughtering hundreds of thousands of Jews. The Romans, Jesus Christ, and the Jews. Daniel chapter 11 verses 33 to 35 King James Version, and they that understand among the people shall instruct many, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil, many days. 34 Now when they shall fall, they shall be holpen with a little help, but many shall cleave to them with flatteries. 35 And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end, because it is yet for a time appointed. In the fullness of time Jesus Christ was born and offered unto the Jews as their Messiah. But his claim was rejected, and he was crucified, cut off, and 40 years later, 70 AD. Jerusalem was destroyed by the Romans, and began the fulfillment of the last half of verse 33, yet they shall fall by the sword, and by flame, by captivity, and by spoil, many days. The Jews have found no rest from persecution from the time they rejected their true Messiah. Even today they persecuted. 35 And some of them of understanding shall fall, to try them, and to purge, and to make them white, even to the time of the end. Here we have the Gospel, Jesus, John the Baptist, the Apostles, and the entire church age. We are shown the persecution of the true Christian. We are also told of many who join themselves to the Christian for other reasons than following Jesus. The church will continue until it is time for the Antichrist. The Antichrist. Daniel chapter 11 verses 36 to 39 King James Version, And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself, and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished, for that is determined shall be done. 37 Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, nor regard any god, for he shall magnify himself above all. 38 But in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold, and silver, and with precious stones, and pleasant things. 39 Thus shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. Here Daniel leaps to the end of the age. We are now going to meet the Antichrist, the rider of the white horse of Revelation 1:2. Several facets of his career are seen here. He will proclaim himself to be God. He will reject the God of Abraham and worship Satan openly. He will begin his time on the world stage by signing a peace treaty with Israel and the Arab nations that surround her. This is the dividing the land for gain. He will enter the temple of God, with his own living image demanding worship for himself and Satan. He shall cause them to rule over many. The them is the Antichrist and Satan. He will honor Satan by demanding that all receive the mark of the beast, without which no man can buy or sell. Taking the mark will be the same as selling the soul to Satan. He will seek to place the entire world under the power of Satan. He seems to be unstoppable. The Antichrist. Daniel chapter 11 verse 40 King James Version, And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him like a whirlwind, with chariots, and with horsemen, and with many ships, and he shall enter into the countries, and shall overflow and pass over. The time of the end is the last days of the nation of Israel, which the Lord Jesus labeled the Great Tribulation. The king of the south is the ruler of Egypt. It may be that this ruler will make an effort to unite the Arab League against the Antichrist. The king of the north is not of the Seleucid dynasty. The king of the north is Gog of Magog in Ezekiel 38 and 39. This is also the rider of the red horse in Revelation 6:3-4. The Russian invasion will bring the massive army of Joel 2 into Israel. The Antichrist will counter both the king of the south and north. Come me against him like a whirlwind, Jeremiah 25:32-33 King James Version, Thus saith the Lord of hosts, Behold, evil shall go forth from nation to nation, and a great whirlwind shall be raised up from the coasts of the earth. 33 And the slain of the Lord shall be at that day from one end of the earth even unto the other end of the earth, they shall not be lamented, neither gathered, nor buried, they shall be dung upon the ground. Whirlwinds here refers to the weapons used. Nuclear bombs create whirlwinds of destruction. The Antichrist. Daniel chapter 11 verses 41 to 43 King James Version 41 He shall enter also into the glorious land, and many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, even Edom and Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon. 42 He shall stretch forth his hand also upon the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. 43 But he shall have power over the treasures of gold and of silver, and over all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Ethiopians shall be at his steps. Russia suffers a horrendous defeat. 5 Out of every 6 soldiers are slain. When the war is over, the Antichrist becomes the occupying power of the region. He will suffer an assassination and be raised back to life. Revelation 13:3 King James Version, And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. It is at this time that he takes total control of Israel. Israel's neighbor Jordan escapes his control. Edom, Moab, and Ammon make up the modern nation of Jordan. As the Antichrist enters Israel, the Jews will flee into Jordan, and that may be the reason that Jordan escapes. Revelation 12:14 And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. He will now control the Egyptian, Libyans and the Ethiopians. The Antichrist. Daniel chapter 11 verse 44 King James Version But tidings out of the east and out of the north shall trouble him, therefore, he shall go forth with great fury to destroy, and utterly to make away many. Towards the end of the Antichrist reign he will get information that the kings of the East and Russia have formed an alliance to challenge him for control. He will marshal his forces with the intent to destroy them. But something will happen that causes the kings of the East and Russia to place themselves under his leadership. Revelation 16:12-14 King James Version, And the 6th angel poured out his vial upon the great river Euphrates, and the water thereof was dried up, that the way of the kings of the east might be prepared. 13 And I saw 3 unclean spirits like frogs come out of the mouth of the dragon, and out of the mouth of the beast, and out of the mouth of the false prophet. 14 For they are the spirits of devils, working miracles, which go forth unto the kings of the earth and of the whole world, to gather them to the battle of that great day of God Almighty. Revelation 16:16 King James Version, And he gathered them together into a place called in the Hebrew tongue Armageddon. It is the return of Jesus Christ that caused them join the Antichrist.